Now, as we read through this example, we see that we have a total of 100 coins that all come from being dimes and quarters, and their value is 1150. And our goal is to find the number of each type of coin. Now, a lot of times in these word problems, the first thing that you're going to be doing is defining what your variables are. And this is really, really, really important to define what your variables are. So we're going to define them in words. Now, if you're having a hard time deciding what your variables should be, a good place to look is the question itself. The question itself is often going to say, hey, find this for me. We're asked to find the number of each type of coin. So we're asked the number of dimes, the number of quarters. So that's a great thing to define as our variable. So let's define D as the number of dimes, and let's define Q as the number of quarters. Now, we have to come up with two equations now somehow. So as we read back through here, we're told two different pieces of information. One about the number of coins that we have, and one about the value of the coins. So these are going to lead to our two equations. Now, how we define our variables is really important now. So we've got to come back to the fact that our variables are representing number of coins, the D for the number of dimes and Q for the number of quarters. So as far as the equations are concerned, that's going to dictate how we write them. So the first equation says we have a total of 100 coins. So that means if I add together my number of dimes and my number of quarters, that should be 100. But then the other piece of information is about the total value. So the value of the coins is 1150. So in this case, don't write this down. We're not simply going to say if I add D plus Q, because D plus Q is not talking about the value from the dimes or the value from the quarters. So I have to consider the fact that dimes are worth 10 cents. So for every dime I have, I'm going to multiply by 10 cents. Or another way of saying that is 0.10 times the number of dimes. That's the value that I have from dimes. The value that I have from quarters would be 0.25 times the number of quarters that I have. Now, if I add those two values together, that's where I should get 1150. Now, if you want, you could go ahead and clear your decimals, kind of like how we clear fractions. So you could multiply both sides of the equation by 100 in order to remove the decimal point, or we could just deal with them. It's up to you, doesn't really matter. Now that we have our system of linear equations, we now need to solve this. And we can use either substitution or addition, doesn't really matter. I'd probably actually use substitution on this one. I would look at that first equation and say, I can solve for D pretty darn easily as 100 minus Q. I could then take that and plug it into the second equation, and I'm going to get 0.10. Now instead of D, I'm going to have 100 minus Q plus my 0.25 Q equals 1150. Now if I distribute my 0.10 across, I'm going to get 10 minus 0.10Q plus 0.25Q equals 1150. Now we can combine like terms with our Q's. 25 minus 10 gives us 15, or 0.15Q. And we can go ahead and subtract the 10 to the other side, leaving us with 1.5. So now if I divide both sides by 0.15 in order to get the Q by itself, I'm going to get Q equals 10. We have 10 quarters here. So let's go ahead and plug this back in to figure out how many dimes we have. D equals 100 minus our Q, or D equals 90. And so this is telling me I have 90 dimes and 10 quarters. Now, our last step of any word problem should be to take a look at this answer and say, did I answer the question and does it make sense? So let's go back to the question itself, where the question itself said find the number of each type of coin. We definitely did that. So now let's see if this answer makes sense. We were supposed to have a total of 100 coins. Do I have 100 coins? Well, sure, I got 100 coins, 90 and 10. Now my value is supposed to be 1150. This should be pretty easy. If you got 90 dimes, that's $9. If you have 10 quarters, that's 250. Add those together, that's 1150. That is what we wanted. So we can be pretty confident in our answer of 90 dimes and 10 quarters. Make sure that we're rereading the question and making sure that we're answering it too. We don't want to say something like D equals 90, Q equals 10, because we made up D, we made up Q. We want to answer in words and say, hey, there's 90 dimes and 10 quarters.